Hello and welcome to the Sun Will Rise. I'm Roshan Mohammed Salih. Fears are growing about alleged Israeli plans to impose sovereignty over the Al-Aqsa mosque compound in Jerusalem, Al-Quds. The mosque is one of the holiest sites for Muslims in the world, the first Qibla in Islam, and the location for when Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad made his famous night journey into the heavens. The compound is also a holy place for Jews who believe it's the site of the original Jewish temple. Some believe extremists want to destroy the Al-Aqsa mosque so that the Jewish temple can be rebuilt. Recently, the Israeli Knesset held a debate on the possibility of imposing sovereignty over the site in what's an incredibly incendiary issue for Palestinians. So on today's show, we'll be discussing with our studio guests how serious the threat to Al-Aqsa mosque is. What do the Israelis plan to do exactly? And what can the Palestinians and others do to stop them? But first, here's Nell Burden with a report from Jerusalem, Al-Quds.
Guardianship over Islam's third holiest site, Al-Aqsa Mosque, in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, remains one of the most sensitive and controversial issues in Palestine and the Middle East today. Therefore, when the Israelis held a Knesset meeting to debate whether Israel should take sovereignty over Al-Aqsa Mosque from the Jordanians, faction party Hamas and members of the religious Waqf immediately issued warnings to Palestinians. While the debate was being held in the Knesset, Israeli forces surrounded the mosque and forcefully removed all Muslims in fear that this move would provoke a demonstration. The following day, the Israeli authorities prevented all Muslim men under 50 and all people who didn't carry an Israeli ID from entering the mosque.
From the beginning of the occupation in 1967, the Israelis have attempted to seize control of Al-Aqsa, and I believe that the Israelis are attempting to legitimize this by now making it Israeli law.
Professor of International Law Dr. Hannah Issa explained the argument over Israeli sovereignty is futile, as he states the issue is rather about the guardianship of the mosque.
First of all, the sovereignty of Al-Aqsa is already in Israel's hands, but we're talking now about guardianship. This is from the Jordanians. The issue of guardianship is not about sovereignty. Israel has sovereignty over the whole of Jerusalem. The issue is that if Jordan relinquishes the guardianship, this will give Israelis free rein to divide the mosque for Jews and Muslims, and they would allow settlers by law to enter the compound.
Officials from Al-Aqsa Mosque claim this debate is part of a greater strategy by Tel Aviv in order to Judaize Jerusalem.
This is a dangerous sign. If the debate comes to fruition, they will destroy the 1994 peace agreement with Jordan and further violate all international agreements and law. The Israelis have already created a culture of Judaizing Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque and continue with their attempts to create a new history on the ground by claiming the area as the Temple Mount, a Jewish historical temple. However, they have never found evidence of its existence.
Officials from Al-Aqsa agree that although the Knesset debate will now be shelved and had no specific outcome, the Israelis continue to pressurize the Palestinians, particularly in their hunt for the remains of a Jewish historical temple in the area. Although they have excessively dug under Al-Aqsa compound, they have so far not found a trace of evidence to support this claim. Although members of Hamas and officials from Al-Aqsa Mosque have issued warnings concerning the future of the mosque, they are more concerned about what is taking place on the ground. This includes the continuous Israeli violations of the mosque, then building Jewish-only buildings surrounding the area and digging under the Al-Aqsa compound. Nell Burden for the Sun Will Rise, occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds.
To discuss the Al-Aqsa crisis, we have two guests with us in the studio today. Rabbi Ahron Cohen is a prominent leader in Neturei Karta, which is an Orthodox Jewish movement which opposes Zionism and the State of Israel. And Shemal Jorda is from the Friends of Al-Aqsa, an NGO which is concerned with defending the human rights of Palestinians and protecting the sacred Al-Aqsa sanctuary. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Shemal, if I could come to you first. How serious do you estimate this threat to Al-Aqsa is?
The threat is extremely serious. It's clear and it's present. If we look at last year there were more incursions and trespasses on Al-Aqsa than any other year beforehand. If you look at the first 2 months of this year, there's been 1,720 trespasses, incursions into Masjid Al-Aqsa.
Why is it accelerated so suddenly?
It's accelerated because it feels as though the eyes of the world have disappeared. It feels as though one of the reasons is because Israel is becoming more and more aggressive towards annexing the whole of Jerusalem. Israel's plan is to have a united Jerusalem, which will be the capital of Israel. Now, under international law, East Jerusalem belongs to the Palestinians. Masjid Al-Aqsa falls under East Jerusalem.
Yes.
So for them, for the Israelis, they want to have complete control over East Jerusalem. That includes Masjid Al-Aqsa, and they'll do whatever it takes to ensure it's annexed and they have the unified capital.
I mean, in the report we saw that settlers were coming into the compound, Jewish settlers, someone called them extremists, and they were coming in with police and soldiers. Yes. So these aren't people operating on their own. There's an official backing to this, isn't there?
Absolutely. A few weeks ago, or was it a week ago, the deputy leader of the Knesset came flanked with Israeli soldiers. This is clear provocation. Clear provocation. As you heard in the report, at the end of last month, for the first time in the Knesset, at the highest level of Israeli parliament, they were discussing how they can take sovereignty over Masjid Al-Aqsa. So this isn't something that we can sweep beneath the carpet and think that it's not happening. It's becoming more and more aggressive, and it's becoming more prominent in society.
Rabbi Cohen, if I can come to you. Obviously, this site is holy for Jews as well. Could you explain to me the significance for Jews?
Yes. The Temple Mount, our teaching is a site where our temple was. We call it the Temple Mount, going back thousands of years. However, the Orthodox Jews, and don't confuse Orthodox Jews with the settlers, because the settlers are religious Zionists, but Zionism in itself is an apostasy as far as Judaism is concerned. So they've combined apostasy with religion and formed the settlers movement. Orthodox Jews believe that the Temple Mount is a holy place, but we're not allowed to go on to the
Why not?
Because it's too holy. We are not, in these days, we are in the Jewish people, our teaching is the Jewish people are in a state of divinely ordained exile, and included in that is the fact that we cannot cleanse ourselves spiritually sufficiently to go on the Temple Mount. The nearest that we get to it is what's known as the Western Wall, where it's traditionally Jews have gone to pray for right through the centuries. And before the Israeli state, the Jews got on quite well with Muslims, and they were allowed to go there and pray. It's only the Zionists who came along and started to provoke with their activities, their wish to be in charge, as it were, there, which is not accepted, not approved of by Orthodox Jews.
But according to your understanding of Judaism, do you want a third temple to be rebuilt on the site?
Our belief is that there will come a time when the whole world will accept that there should be a third temple there. I always say to Muslims, you don't have to be alarmed when we say that, because our teaching is that we're not allowed to force the issue. You'll either accept our belief or not accept.
So that doesn't involve the destruction of the Al-Aqsa
Not
Mosque?
at all. On the contrary, our teaching now, the Orthodox Jewish teaching, is that in no way are we allowed to interfere with the control of Jerusalem and Palestine, in fact, which has been historically for hundreds of years in the hands of Muslims, and that's how it should carry on.
And Shemol, tell me about the excavations that are taking place under Al-Aqsa Mosque. How serious a threat do they pose to the mosque itself?
The excavations have been going on for decades now. The excavations have actually shaken one of the bridges on the site. It's something that continues, and it's something that makes the Al-Aqsa itself more unstable.
Yeah, and I mean, is that a deliberate policy, do you think, to actually try to destroy the mosque by undermining its foundations?
Well, one of the reasons the excavations are happening, as was explained earlier, is for Israel to try and find some kind of excavations to have a legitimate claim over Al-Aqsa. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason, obviously, is to destroy the Al-Aqsa in the first place. But it's also Muslims themselves, we have a misconception of what Masjid Al-Aqsa is. Masjid Al-Aqsa aren't the buildings, isn't the grey dome mosque, isn't the golden dome mosque. It's a whole area, it's a whole sanctuary around it. So it's not the buildings, it's the land that's holy in itself. So that's something that we need to bear in mind.
Can I very briefly? I must stress this again. The difference between Orthodox Judaism and the settler movement. Orthodox Judaism in no way supports any interference with Muslim control of the Temple Mount, of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it's only the settler movement who have combined fallaciously Zionism with Judaism, and they combine a sort of a wish to take control. It's only, and there's no, under Orthodox Judaism, there's no intention whatsoever of destroying a mosque or trying to build a third temple by force in any way at all.
But is that a minority opinion that you hold within Judaism?
It is nowadays a minority opinion, sadly, but we must remember that we have the authority of history. Zionism is only 100 years old, and when it started, the vast majority of Jewish people did not approve of it. And the teaching of Judaism going right back through thousands of years since the Jews were sent into exile has been the view that I've explained to you.
Well, we are going to continue this discussion a little bit later on in the show, but for the moment, we're going to move on. Your views and your comments are an integral part of this show, so we do need your inputs on our social media pages. Here's Camelia Shambayati with what you've been saying to us about Israeli threats to Al-Aqsa.
Thank you, Roshan, and welcome to the Social Media Roundup, where you can keep updated about what people are saying online about Palestinian issues. This week, we have asked, why are Israeli forces attacking Palestinian worshippers? Is the goal to Judaize Jerusalem? Now let's take a look at some of your responses. So on our Facebook wall, Tan from the UK says, today Palestinians are treated worse than animals by the Zionist regime. Jordan, Qatar, Turkey, and above all, Saudi Arabia are the ones to blame. These 4 countries are fully responsible for Palestinian suffering. And in another message, Yusuf from Canada says, so-called Muslim countries should be ashamed of letting Palestinians suffer these kinds of religious insults. Without unity, we won't be able to do anything. The surrounding Arab Muslims must wake up and do something. We have also received some emails. Let's take a look at a couple. Aisha from Pakistan says, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem is Islam's 3rd holiest site after Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. How can Muslim governments stand and watch this? If they succeed in doing this, all of the Islamic world will lose its sovereignty to the Zionist entity. And in another message, Kath from the US says, whilst the world blows hard about Crimea, the Israeli regime continues its rampant brutality. But as with all wickedness, the day will come when they have to answer for their moral corruption. Now let's take a quick look at what people have been tweeting. So Mohammed from Occupied Palestine says, it's only a matter of time until Zionists deprive us of Salah and Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Muslim world watches. Another tweet's coming through. Helen from Spain says, Israelis want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque in order to build the so-called Temple Mount. Now that's it for this week. You can find the details of how you can contact us on your screens. You can send us emails, post messages on our Facebook page, The Sun Will Rise Show, or you can visit our Twitter page, where you can follow us on @SunWillRiseShow. Don't forget to hashtag SunWillRise. Back to you, Roshan.
Thank you, Camelia. Another member of our team, Luke Mason, has been out and about this week attending a conference in London on the relationship between Palestine and the European Union. Here's what he found out.
I'm here today at the University of Westminster, where the Palestinian Return Centre is hosting a one-day special conference on Europe and Palestine. This has brought many leading experts in the field together to discuss this historic relationship and what the future holds. While many countries in Europe seem to have a negative effect on Palestine, there is a growing swell of people throughout the continent determined to fight against this injustice. Today's speakers shared this determination, as well as providing an historical context.
We're looking at the relationship between Europe and Palestine, and that's also in historical terms. So we're going right back to the British role in Palestine in the form of the Mandate in the early part of the 20th century.
The European Union is seen to be very supportive towards Israel, but their official policy on the illegal Israeli settlements contradicts this.
They regard the settlements in the West Bank as totally illegal under international law. And based on that, the official EU position is to do no business with the settlements and to deny any funding to Israeli organizations.
There seems to be double standards in the EU's official policy towards Israel and Palestine. But what is their true position?
The EU position toward Palestine is to keep the two-state solution alive, not to criticize the state of Israel, to keep the Palestinians calm, not to go for any new intifada. They are worried about the Palestinian resistance. So their position is always biased, unbalanced, close to the American position.
But does America have any influence in European policy?
It does affect the European role hugely, dramatically actually. Actually, European foreign policy is shaping the political position for the Europeans towards Palestine. It's almost the American foreign policy that is affecting all situations and different aspects in the Palestine issue.
With the EU's ambiguous policy towards Palestine, people are becoming increasingly frustrated with the lack of real action. But the delegates present today are hopeful they can present a clearer vision, one based on justice for the Palestinian people. Luke Mason reporting for The Sun Will Rise.
Rabbi Cohen, if I can come to you again and just ask you about, some people watching this will be surprised to see an Orthodox Jew criticizing Israel. What exactly is your objection to Zionism in particular?
Two objections. First of all, the whole agenda of Zionism is against our belief. Our teaching is that the Jewish people are supposed to be in a divinely decreed exile. We're not allowed to form a state of our own. But that's something perhaps more understood internally within the Jewish people. But looking at from a world point of view, Zionism has adopted a total opposition to humanitarian values. They've taken over somebody else's country. They've caused, since Zionism has started, which is just over 100 years ago, they've caused thousands, tens of thousands of deaths, both Jewish and non-Jewish. And Zionism is a tragedy, both for the Jewish people and for the Palestinians.
And you see the Al-Aqsa crisis, the situation, in the context of that occupation?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, ever since the history of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount, as we call it, and the Western Wall, the history of the Zionist wish to control it goes back a long time. The unrest that was in Palestine in 1929, there were lots of unrest that was still under the British mandate, also was ignited by the Zionist wish to take control over the Temple Mount.
Shmuel, what I don't understand is, if Israel wanted to take over the Al-Aqsa compound, they could. They have the military strength to do that. What's stopping them from doing it?
I think, one, it'll be a complete, blatant disregard for international law, which doesn't stop them, as you correctly point out. But I think Masjid Al-Aqsa is a red line. As we saw in 2000, when Ariel Sharon went into Masjid Al-Aqsa, flanked by guards, you saw the second Intifada, known as the Aqsa Intifada, lasted for 5 years, five years or so, with 5,000 plus deaths. This will be an outcry. If they was to step foot with the notion of taking over Masjid Al-Aqsa, I believe there will be an international outcry, especially from the Muslims, to say hands off Al-Aqsa.
And how serious do you see this present crisis? It seems to rumble on for years and years. Yeah. Is there anything different about what's happening now? Has it got the potential to spark another intifada?
I think so now. I think all the factors that we can point to now, in terms of the increase last year, in terms of how we've seen the increase of the last first 2 months of the year. If we look at for the last two Friday prayers, the restriction has been imposed more so than before. It's for men under 40 can't attend. Before it's normally under 50.
And they always say it's for security reasons.
For security reasons, so it's increasing. The restriction, even just not on Fridays, during the weekday, when youngsters have classes in Masjid Al-Aqsa, they're being restricted from going in. So the restrictions are increasing, and it's very similar. The signs we're seeing are very similar to what we saw in 2000. So we need to make sure we keep an eye on this.
Rabbi Cohen, practically what can we do, apart from sitting here and talking about it, raising awareness? Is there anything practical that people in the region can do, and people from outside the region as well?
Well, I must say, you know, as you introduced me as being part of the Neturei Karta, which is the group which opposes Zionism, we look at the problem affecting the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the context of the whole existence of Zionism and indeed the State of Israel, which we consider to be a faulty concept, and our prayer, we often say, we repeat this, our prayer is for the total dismantlement of the state known as the State of Israel, peaceful dismantlement of the state known as the State of Israel, even when, and we're sure that will come about. We don't know how long it'll take, but when it comes about, that will solve the problem.
So you can't solve the Al-Aqsa problem without solving the Israel problem.
That's right.
And Shamil, what about you? Solutions here? Do you encourage people to go there, for example? Or?
Yeah, we do encourage people to go there. We encourage people to go there and visit and exercise their right to go and visit and pray in Masjid Al-Aqsa. People in Jerusalem or Gaza, they can't go and pray in Masjid Al-Aqsa. So if we can, we should make the effort to do so and have that claim to be able to do so. What can Palestinians do themselves? Unfortunately, we have to remember they are under occupation. They can't move without getting in trouble, without getting arrested or their life being under threat. So that's why it's so important internationally that we really do rise up on the issue of Palestine. And we really do raise our voices. As you said, we can sit around and talk, but that's great to raise awareness, but we need to do a lot more. We need to be much more involved in the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. We need to make sure that we're lobbying our parliamentarians. Part of my role...
Is that having an effect, BDS?
It is definitely having a huge effect. If you look in the last 5 years in terms of how it's grown, in terms of the boycott movement, people understanding what boycott is. If you look in terms of Parliament, how the issue of Palestine is being spoken in Parliament, more questions are being asked in Parliament. And that's very, very important, but we're nowhere near what it should be. My role at Friends of Al-Aqsa is to speak to parliamentarians, and a lot of them tell me, well, no one's actually come to speak to us about it, so it's easy for us not to do it. Yes. So my call out to viewers is engage with your parliamentarians and make them know that it's something that you want them to act on.
We've got about 40 seconds left, Rabbi Cohen. I'll give the last word to you.
The Neturei Karta say that the public should begin campaigning about the very illegitimacy of the whole state of Israel. It's a long, long journey to go, but really nowadays they're beginning to talk about the one-state solution, which would automatically solve that to some degree. But the Western powers and Western countries are very, very wary about talking in that vein at all, but they should begin.
Sure. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming down to the studio and joining us today and educating us about the Al-Aqsa mosque compound crisis. That's all the time we've got today. Once more, I want to thank you and say thank you to all our guests. And please don't forget to get busy on our social media pages, telling us what you think of the issues raised in this program. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time for more features and analysis on Palestine. Bye-bye.